Welcome to Podcastaway. Podcastaway is a show where every month a guest talks about the 9 pieces of electronic media that would get them through a genre fiction inspired isolation situation. Media can include films, television shows and computer games, and the guests can also choose one book and one luxury item, as well as devising their own isolation situation. Through their choices, we get to know about them and their projects, where they've been in life, and where they want to go. You can find the full interview on Patreon and the short version wherever podcasts are found. Podcastaway is a Geek Nerd Podcasts production. You can find Geek Nerd Podcasts on Twitter @GeekNerdPod and on Patreon, patreon.com/geeknerd. Enjoy the show. And today's guest is Carla. Hi Carla, how are you doing today?
Hello, I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm pretty good. For those who don't know, Carla is one of our amazing patrons. Thank you so much for being a patron, Carla.
Very welcome.
Why don't you tell everybody at home a little bit about yourself?
Oh, I didn't know you were going to ask that. I would have made something really interesting up. Oh, Jules, you suck. So I feel like right now I should take the piss and be like, I like long walks on the beach and moonlit evenings. No, sorry. Cats, roller skates, tattoos, food. That's literally it about me. I'm boring, and those are the things I like.
I mean, that's a pretty good list. There's this perception that you have to be like, an astronaut or something when you're doing these kind of shows. But everybody's awesome. We all do different things in our lives, and as long as we're proud of what we do, that's all that matters. There are people out here listening to that and think she likes cats. Yes. How many do you have?
I've got 4 cats.
4 cats.
Yes.
Names?
I do. I've got Cass and Meg, named after Castiel and Meg from Supernatural. And then I've got Sid and Ichabod.
Those are some great names.
Thank you very much.
I think at least 3 people have chosen the TV show Supernatural on here as well, so that helps.
It's a good show. It's a very good show.
Let's start by talking about your isolation situation.
I am going to be cliche and I'm going to pick a desert island.
There's nothing cliche about that. You are episode 7 and you're the first person to pick the desert island.
Amazing.
Talk to me about your desert island. I mean, what was the reasoning behind that?
I've always liked anywhere that's kind of beachy, not necessarily just, like laying out in the sun or anything, but it's just the water and the sounds of it and stuff is just quite calming and relaxing, and that's always been quite an important thing to me.
I've talked to you, you're the 7th, and everybody's gone with the kind of apocalypse, world's coming to an end, we're sheltering, we're bunkering ourselves in, but, I've told everybody exactly the same as I've told you. It can be any kind of isolation situation.
I'm enjoying myself. I'm getting away from the real world in this situation.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I mean, I don't know why more people haven't chosen this. It's probably the thing I would choose. You've got the sun, you've got the sky, you've got fresh air, you've potentially got like a coconut up in the tree.
I can try and be like Lady MacGyver and, make some cool shit.
Yeah, great choice. And are you living in have you fashioned yourself a little hut? Are you living in like a cave?
I like to think that I've made myself a little hut, and perhaps somewhere else on the island I've made myself like a little teepee out of some palm leaves and stuff. That's my holiday home for when it gets too much looking at one side of the beach.
Okay, let's begin. What is the first piece of electronic media that you want to talk about?
I am going to go with Bob's Burgers.
For those who haven't seen it, give us a sense of it and maybe sell it to us.
Okay, so it's animated. It is about this guy called Bob and his family, the Belchers. They've got a burger place. They have 3 very strange but amazing children, and it's all to do with their lives and what they get up to and stuff like that. It's probably not sold it very well, but it's full of horrendously awful pun jokes and just general ridiculousness.
And how does it make you feel when you watch it?
Just good, like just a sense of like silly fun. It's kind of like being a kid again and just like watching cartoons. It's probably one of those shows that I never get bored of. I can see an episode again and again, and I will still find new things in it that make me laugh, jokes that I maybe missed before. And it's just easy to watch. You can kind of pay attention to it, you can not pay attention to it. It's just there, and it's just a nice noise.
I think it's important if you're going to be potentially spending the rest of your natural life with these 9 pieces of media, you need to watch something that you know, it affects you a certain way. Maybe not every choice that everybody makes is necessarily to make them laugh. There are other more emotions, you know, you want to create yourself a little bit of an emotional mosaic, you know, so you can visit different things. But the important thing is you've got to get some replayability out of these.
Yeah, there's nothing worse than sort of you've seen it once, that's it, never again. To be stuck with stuff like that would be horrendous.
Do you watch much animation?
Not that much, actually, no. I don't know, I guess I don't know really where to start with it.
It's interesting. I think a lot of people would dive right in on this and just give you all sorts because I feel like we're having a bit of an animation moment at the moment. Obviously, back, you know, 30 years ago, there was The Simpsons. But we're in a mood now, or we're in a period now where it feels like an adult audience are catered to in the animated world, unlike any other period. There's a lot of great stuff going on at the moment. I've talked about BoJack Horseman on this show, which is an amazing. It talks about mental health in such an incredibly direct way, and it's done in animation. And it's like a kind of, I always think of animation a bit of like a Trojan horse. They can send you these big messages and these big talking points through this far more approachable medium, you know. So yeah, it's a really interesting period. Do you have a favourite episode of Bob's Burgers?
So there is one, Bob and his son Gene go onto this like morning TV show, and they do like a cooking segment on it. And Louise is their sort of psychopathic, more psychotic, I guess, like 7, 8 year old, and she's just hilarious. Her little green dress, her bunny ears, and there's this bit where she's having an argument with one of the ladies of the TV network, and this lady's quite fearful of this child, and she just looks her dead in the eye with like this little eye twitch, and she's just like, I smell fear on you. And it just hit me so hard. And she's my favorite character anyway, and because it made me laugh so much, I ended up getting a Louise tattoo on my shin with that quote at the bottom, because every time I see it, it just makes me laugh. So my other episode again is to do with Louise, and it's a Halloween episode. Basically, nothing ever scares Louise, and the family have been trying for years and years, and finally they pull off this huge elaborate hoax. But for the whole episode, you've got no idea that they're pulling this trick on her. You think all these things are going wrong, and they end up, and there's a house fire and all sorts, and then she ends up sort of sitting on the roof having this huge great big meltdown, and then all the family sort of like come out, pull off masks and stuff, and they've done this thing to her, and you expect her to be like really really devastated, and you know they've really affected her, but she loves it. She thinks it's absolutely hilarious, and that kind of reminded me of me when I was a child, because that's the sort of weird thing that I would have absolutely loved, being scared shitless to the point where I think, you know, this is it, this is how I die now, and then finding out it was just someone fucking around. It's a sick sense of humour.
Do you watch Sunny in Philly?
On and off, yeah. Again, it's on my list, and I kind of dip in and out, but I don't religiously watch it.
It just reminds me of the episode The Gang Broke D, but it's the reverse. They make everything go well. It makes me laugh just thinking about it. They make everything go well for her because she's like so depressed. And at the end, they basically say, "It's all a lie. We got you. We got you." And she just tailspins into an even worse depression.
Oh, that's amazing.
It's horrific, but it's a very good episode. Okay, let's move on to number 2.
So number 2, I think I'm going to go with a game, and I'm going to go with Red Dead Redemption.
For those who haven't played Red Dead, just give us a tiny little explainer for what it is.
I like to describe it as GTA in the Wild West. You can run around being as good as you want, as savage as you want, but you're on a horse wearing a cool hat.
What got you into it?
So, funny story, also a slightly sick sense of humour story. There's a theme here. My husband started playing it originally, and I sort of wandered in, sat on the sofa watching him play this, and I was just like, "Oh, you've got a horse! Like, this is cool. What is this I want to play?" And he said, "Well, if you want to have a little go on mine, then I'm going to have to show you how to shoot, because I don't want to be getting killed." So yeah, he sort of I took the controller, was on the little horse riding around. He took me into the town, was setting up like little target practices for me. And over the little saloon they've got in the town, Armadillo, there was some like little kerosene lights along the walkway. So I started shooting at those, thinking this was quite fun because I had like the automatic aim on. So I was hitting them nicely. And this character on the game walked underneath one of the lights as I shot it, and he set on fire. And I thought this was savage and amazing. And from that point, I knew that this was a game that I wanted to play.
That is a heartwarming story. Do you and your husband play together frequently, or was that kind of a one-off?
No, that was kind of a one-off, really. He doesn't play Xbox very much. He's very into like PC gaming and stuff. So once we kind of found that there was a game that I really liked, he didn't feel bad going and leaving me playing that whilst he was playing something else.
You're one of the rare people that's picked 3 games on Podcastaway. Why is Red Dead Redemption something that you'd want to spend the rest of your natural life playing?
I never ever get bored of it. I will sometimes follow a bit of story. If I get fed up doing story, I'll just go rogue and do my own little things. I've got like little side missions in the game. So you could be trotting along on your horse, doing your thing up a mountain, and then suddenly you'll hear like the cries of help or whatever. And it might be like some woman on a stagecoach that's crashed and things need saving. And then you go and save her and you find out it's all some sort of elaborate ruse to rob you. And then you can take vengeance.
I do enjoy vengeance.
I really enjoy vengeance. I have had some beautiful vengeful moments on that game.
I mean, could you regale us with one, or is it something that just there's so many of them?
So a vengeful moment. I was riding on my horse, and a little side mission came up that someone had robbed a horse from the farm. So I thought, good Samaritan, I'm going to go after this person and I'm going to get that horse. I'm going to take it back to the farm. And my mission was going amazingly well. I got the man off. He did a runner and I couldn't see him. So then I lassoed the other horse, started riding away with it. And then the man shot my horse dead. And I was very, very upset by this because I was just trying to be a good Samaritan for once. So I rode after him. I lassoed and hogtied him and put him on the back of my horse. And then I rode across almost the entire map to get to the train lines. And then I laid the man down on the train track and then just sat and waited for about 10 minutes for the train to come past and smush him.
That is fucking superb. That is fucking brilliant.
I felt that my horse needed justice. And that was the way that I got my justice for the horse.
It feels like a moment from like I can't even remember, like a 1920s, black and white with the music like dun 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 dun. Dun.
Absolutely, I would be twiddling my little moustache as well.
That imagery is delicious. Thank you so much for that story. Okay, let's move on to number 3.
I am gonna go for. Oh, what should I pick? There's so much. I'm gonna go for Schitt's Creek. For some reason, because so many people were going on about it, I decided to boycott it and I just refused to watch it and I don't really know why. And then it's during the lockdown actually. My nan who lives with us, she wanted to be introduced to Netflix and I didn't know what to start her with. And then she saw that on the menu and she was just like, oh, what's this? We'll give it a go. So reluctantly, I was just like, oh, fine. Yeah, okay. And within 2 episodes, I was in love with it. It's so funny and hilarious, but also really heartwarming. I realised I just said funny and hilarious. That's the same thing. It's heartwarming. It's a tale of people sort of losing everything, but then kind of getting everything back in a completely different way, which sounds so like sappy, but it's fantastic. It's so well written and acted.
If you could pick one emotion that you sort of most connect with this TV show, what do you think it would be?
Hope.
And why does it make you feel that way?
The people in it, whether they're sort of the main characters, the roses that kind of lose everything and then end up sort of rediscovering who they actually are, or whether it's the people that originally come from Schitt's Creek who are also really happy with what they've got, they're content, they're always hopeful. It's just a really nice sort of message of it kind of doesn't matter what you have got as long as you're surrounded by sort of good people and things, it's always going to be all right. And I think that's really nice.
Do you have a favourite episode?
Yes, I think it is one of the last episodes in season 2. Two of the main characters, John and Moira, husband and wife, it's their anniversary. It's the first anniversary they've had since they've kind of lost everything. And they end up going to this really sort of, not for them fancy restaurant, but for sort of your average Joes. And they end up running into some friends from like their past life, so to speak. And they're chatting to them. They haven't spoken since they lost everything because all their friends kind of went AWOL. And anyway, they end up all sitting together having this really nice meal, and they're sort of reverted back to how they used to be. And then the mayor of Schitt's Creek and his wife, who have sort of become their friends and have really helped them sort of try and find their feet again, come in, and they all end up sitting together. And these rich friends are just, they're putting the town apart. They've got no idea that these people come from this town, but they're laughing about it and sort of saying how like backwards the people are and how it's all like rednecky and just real like slurry, awful things. And you've got that moment of, you can tell Moira and Johnny don't really know whether to sort of side with their old friends, the people who they want to be like again, or stand up for these new people that have really like come to their aid when they needed it the most. And they end up sticking with them, and they really stand up for them. And it's sort of a taking a kind of stand up for those who have stood up for you. And it's just really lovely when he sort of tells his rich friends to kind of shove it, these are good people, and he corrects them all the stuff he says. And the look on the faces of like their new friends from Schitt's Creek is just, it's priceless. They didn't expect that, and it was just really lovely.
I think Richard, when he spoke about it in episode 4, I think he had a real like deep connection with it. He actually left it for his 9th because it was the one that had made most impact, I think, on his life, in recent times. It's really nice to hear that a TV show is kind of having these kind of moments and making these kind of connections with its audience. I would say we're like in a golden era of TV. Probably started with Lost in like 2004, and we're getting things like, Game of Thrones, Westworld, like really high concept things. And so we've got this golden age of great TV, but we've also got peak TV, where there is just so much TV as well. And so many people I talk to are like, oh God, I really want to watch that show, but there are just so many shows at the moment. And so because of peak TV, that means there is unfortunately a great deal of dross as well. And it's nice that there are still shows that, Schitt's Creek, it's not Game of Thrones. It doesn't sound like it's, some millions and millions is poured into it, but it's still having these really important connections with people, and it's sending out the right messages into the world. And yeah, I think TV, gets a lot of shit. I just think it deserves more respect. Let's move on to number 4.
Okay, we're going to go for film. I'm going to pick The Little Mermaid.
Okay, The Little Mermaid. When did you first see it?
It came out, I want to say 89 it came out. So I was only a couple of years old. Probably would have been one of the first films that I remember seeing. So yeah, I would have been super, super young.
I think the first thing I ever saw in the cinema was Aladdin.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, it went. So did you see this at the cinema or like VHS or?
No, it would have been VHS. I think my first cinema film was Mr. Nanny.
Is that the one with Hulk Hogan?
Yes.
I just had to go into the recesses of my mind for a second just to make sure.
I just remember that it was a Hulk Hogan film, and I was desperate to see it because, I was going to be Carla Hogan one day.
Okay, Little Mermaid.
Yes.
Is it your favourite Disney?
It's one of my favourite Disneys. It's hard to pick an actual favourite because I've got different ones and for completely different reasons. So, if you want, I mean, technically you could get on the bandwagon and say it's not Disney, it's Pixar, but Brave. That is probably one of my favourites because, strong female character, doesn't need any other person, male, female, non-binary, anything to save her. She fucks shit up. She acknowledges that she's fucked shit up, and then she goes out of her way to fix it. And I think that's a really cool thing to sort of teach children. You don't need someone to bail you out. You just gotta own up and you can do it yourself. And it's just got a really nice soundtrack to it as well. Obviously, it's not your normal sort of like Disney kind of sing-along stuff. It's sort of beautiful Celtic instrumentals and bits like that, and that's just really nice and relaxing. So I quite like that different vibe to it as well. And then, it's so cliche to say Frozen, but I do love Frozen. And again, it's the whole like true love that sort of fixes everything. But again, it's not trying to push home that stereotype of, it's true love from a man and a woman's first kiss and stuff that saves it. It's family. Like, the sisters really love each other, and it's the love of them sacrificing stuff to help the other one that fixes everything. And again, that's really important as well. So the Little Mermaid. So yeah, now there's the one side of me that kind of doesn't want to like it because it's kind of problematic. She's 16. She wants to give up absolutely everything for some dude that she's never met before. But it's also just so magical because she's a mermaid. And what child at some point doesn't want to be a mermaid? And it's got great songs.
Which song is your favourite song?
I would say Part of Your World. She's singing it in a cave and it's just all a bit dramatic and it's wonderful. And I did many a horrendous rendition of that to my family as a child, which I don't think they'll ever forgive me for.
Why does it get down to the island?
Again, it's one of those that sort of gives me fond memories as well as memories that make me laugh. So because of that film, I almost drowned as a child. Now that sounds scary and awful, but now I look back and it's quite funny. My uncle took my cousin and me swimming. I was maybe about 6, and he was one end of the kids' pool with my cousin. I was the other end, and I decided, obviously, I wanted to swim like a mermaid, so therefore my legs needed to be sort of stuck together. So I got one armband, and I put both ankles through the armband. Now you could obviously see where this goes. So I shot straight underwater with my legs up in the air and couldn't figure out how to get right way up. And my uncle pretty much had to just grab me by the hair to pull me back up. And I wasn't scared. I was just really, really sad that it didn't work. And then I tried many, many things, like in the bath with a pair of my mum's jogging bottoms. I would put both legs through one trouser leg to try and act as a tail and all sorts. So it just reminds me of like silly things from a kid, and it's nice.
Yeah, so you were definitely pissed off when she got human legs.
Oh yeah, really, really pissed off. Yeah, it made me lose a little bit of respect for her.
All right, let's move on to the next one.
We are going to go for another game, and we're going to go for Animal Crossing.
The term gamer, there are a lot of kind of interpretations of what it means. This seems like what I would refer to as like a crossover game. Still totally relevant, and still the people that play it are totally like bona fide gamers, but it feels like a different beast entirely to someone like me.
Yeah, it's kind of the same thing as I would say people that play The Sims. Again, I grew up like playing The Sims as well, and it's very much that kind of. It's nothing to do with like Assassin's Creed or Fable or Call of Duty or anything. It's a completely different kind of thing, but people that play it are still gamers. Like a lot of time has to go into it, a lot of effort and thought. It's pretty strategic.
Give us a sense of what it is and maybe tell us who this game is for.
I think this game is for anyone. I've seen a lot of things online, especially during the whole COVID thing, of like elderly people sort of playing it so they can connect with other people, kids, teenagers, your stroppy brother, and like just anyone can play it. So basically, you move to an island. So that's also appropriate for this podcast. And you get a couple of other campers there with you who are then going to move to the island. You've got this raccoon called Tom Nook, who's basically going to let you live on the island, but will charge you extortionate amounts of bells, which is their currency, to live there and upgrade your house and things. So you have to do things to earn bells, sort of foraging fruit, fishing, catching bugs, and things like that.
I'm of the belief that, much like TV and film, gaming gets a really bad rap as well. And I love stories where gaming is used to kind of help people. We've had some great stories on this podcast about, people kind of gaming with like family members, like round a sofa, and it kind of like reminding them of better times. Gaming being used to help people with disabilities, gaming being used to connect generations. But that's when we haven't heard, stories about older people being able to connect, or just keep the mind stimulated with something that, when they were a kid, they would have seen like a Switch with Animal Crossing, thought it was witchcraft. I just think that's really, really important. And it kind of reminds me also of, it feels like about a decade ago now when brain training, for like the little, I can't remember what Game Boy it was on, but that was
Yeah.
another thing that would stimulate people's minds of all ages. So yeah,
Yeah.
that sounds like a really beneficial thing that's happening.
Yeah, and I think it's really nice because as well as obviously stimulating the brains and sort of keeping them interested and out of their own head, not dwelling on what's going on and things, you can visit other people's islands. So say that they've got family members abroad. So not only is it because of the lockdown situation that they haven't been able to see them, but because, time in general means that they can't go to see them because they can't travel or can't afford to travel. They can visit them on there and you can sort of actively play this thing together and speak to each other like real time rather than just look at a screen and talk to each other. You're doing things, you're helping each other, and it's just a different kind of connection that you get to have. And I think that's really important.
Animal Crossing, what would you change about it?
Oh, I'd love to skip the dialogue. I really, really would. There's so many things that you do, like selling stuff in the Nook shop, that it doesn't matter how many times you do it, the dialogue is just the same every single time. And you can speed it up a little bit, but you can't just sort of get rid of it. And that would be really nice just to be able to make that go away.
What does gaming mean to you?
I think gaming is really good for mental health. I suffer from depression and anxiety, and it's a really good way of when things in the real world feel a little bit too much and I haven't got the energy to sort of sit there and concentrate on a book, but I'm too fidgety to like lay there and listen to music. I can put on a game like Animal Crossing and just kind of low energy do something that completely takes me out of how I'm feeling at that moment. It's just a really nice sort of a little break from reality. I think it's really important.
I like that low energy do something.
Yeah, exactly. Because I'm doing something, so I can use that fidgetiness, but also I haven't got to run around and do loads of stuff and then beat myself up for not being able to do it right or fast enough. Or it's like a no consequence thing. It's really nice.
I've also got the kind of mental health anxiety thing. And for me, I think the escapism, you've kind of alluded to, you didn't use the word, but escapism I think is just really important. And I don't think people really understand that. Obviously it's probably like a generational thing. Back in the day it was, books and music, but even my parents were gamers back in, I think it was the Commodore 64 or something. They'd
Yeah.
play a game called Eureka where you type things in rather than using like a controller. I just think escapism is so important. And there's no, it's not a retreat. It's just, a kind of biding your time kind of thing. Just taking stock, just listening to yourself and if you kind of, if you know yourself well, you might just think, I just need a moment.
Everyone always goes on about self-care, and I think a lot of people have this idea that self-care has to be something that's going to either better yourself or like have a bath or like things like that, or even just talking about it. And but everyone's self-care looks completely different. And if that is spending 2 hours sort of going around picking the weeds off your island on a computer game, and that helps you feel more relaxed and yourself again and kind of almost like resetting you to a functioning standpoint, then that's your self-care and you do it, you go for it.
I don't know about you, but I've got slight OCD. And sometimes when I play a computer game, a good example obviously is the hidden packages on Grand Theft Auto or the feathers on Assassin's Creed. I'm good at like not giving into it in my normal life. I make this kind of bargain with myself that when we get on the computer game, go fucking nuts. And I'm currently playing Rise of the Tomb Raider, and there are all these documents like everywhere, like hundreds of the damn things. And so yeah, I mean even just last night, I turned on my PlayStation. And all I did, I didn't, wasn't going around killing people or playing the game. I was just searching for these documents. And some of them,
Amazing.
they're up on like this like mountain ridge or something. You got to figure out the way to get up there. It's just so relaxing. It might sound so banal or juvenile to people, but it's just so relaxing. And the pursuit of trophies. There was I can't remember the name of the guy. He was like he was a character, and E3 every year he was one of like the PlayStation spokesman, and he his whole thing was, and we spend our lives dedicated to collecting trophies that aren't real, but they are. And I really like respond to that.
I understand with the OCD, but actually, I kind of use gaming with that a little bit differently. So again, it's OCD is something that I suffer with. Mine is to do with like rituals, so like numbers, and I've got a real big thing about even numbers. And I use that as a way that feels safe to me to not have things in even numbers and like challenge my OCD there. So if I'm like planting like a load of trees or whatever in a particular formation because I want it to look a specific way, I will plant them in odd numbers and things, stuff that makes me feel slightly uncomfortable, but because it's in like what feels like a no risk situation, it makes it sit a little bit easier. So I use it to challenge those slightly.
That's a great idea. People say you've got to do things that scare you, and there are levels. Obviously, you'd agree with me. I think that it's not jumping out of a plane or something, but you've
Yeah,
got to
exactly.
start and you've got to build. And it's instead of doing one big thing, do a mosaic of little things.
And I actually think that doing those sort of little mosaic piece things can be a lot more beneficial, because if you do that one thing that's really, really huge and scares the shit out of you, but you overcome it and stuff, well, that just feels like one thing. Whereas if you do lots of small things, it's like lots of really small victories that show you time and time again, okay, well, nothing bad will happen if I do this, and you do it again, and or something slightly different and nothing bad happens. It's like positive reinforcement in a way.
Let's move on to your next choice.
I'm going to go for The Office.
Just confirm to me which one you're talking about.
The American Office.
Interesting, interesting. I've been definitely thinking. Oh, I'm not sure which way she's going to go with this. The American Office, interesting choice. I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory, but give us like a 15-second synopsis of what The Office is.
An office has a camera crew follow them around doing a documentary for 10 years.
Well said, succinct, nailed it. What do you like about this TV show?
Some aspects feel so true to life. I can see some of my co-workers in them, even like the really silly, like mundane little things. But then some things are also just so hilariously ridiculous that it's just stupid and really funny and light-hearted. But again, there's also like some really touching moments that sort of hit you hard in the feels. It has made me cry a good few times.
Why does it make it to the island?
I was really, really late with the Office bandwagon, and considering sort of how long ago it finished, I've actually only watched it this year, um, and I pretty much binged it in a couple of weeks. And because I think it's so new to me, I could watch it again and again and again, because it's going to take a little while for it to get old. And even when it feels like it's getting old, I'm not sure if it will feel that old, because there's always so much to sort of see and like explore, so many like little jokes that I might have missed.
Why have you chosen it ahead of the UK Office, or have you not seen the UK Office?
I couldn't get on with the UK Office. Contrary to popularity, I guess, I don't really like Ricky Gervais.
Controversial.
Yeah, I know. He really frustrates me. I'm not quite sure why. I've watched a few things he's been in. I've watched some of the Idiot Abroad stuff. I've watched, is it Afterlife?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, that he did, and I loved that. But otherwise, he just really irritates me.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I've been watching a lot of. I've discovered a new YouTube channel. I think I've been sending you some of the videos, and I've been
Yeah.
watching kind of reactions to Carl, in an Idiot Broad. But obviously you've got the Ricky stuff as well, and the guy is just constantly just laughing at how kind of savage Ricky is. And I think it's just something that Americans they don't get that savage. They don't get the
No,
kind of really shitty way that Ricky does with Carl. So yeah,
no.
you can appreciate that he's a bit of a kind of Marmite figure.
Absolutely.
But
Yeah.
that's interesting. Yeah, most people that have seen both go the UK Office. But yeah, it's interesting you'd pick that one. Do you have a favorite episode or a favorite character?
Oh, characters really difficult. Again, there's so many for different reasons. And more than favourite episode, I think it's just like some favourite moments. So one of them was in an episode where they were doing like first aid training and they had to do CPR. And Dwight ended up cutting the face off of this like CPR
Yeah.
dummy and putting it on his face.
I remember that, yeah.
It was so terrifying and hilarious. And just, it was one of those moments where I just like rewound it to watch that bit again because it just kept really making me laugh.
Let's move on to your next choice.
Okay, my next choice is going to be a film, and it's going to be Jojo Rabbit.
Difficult, but do you want to give us like a very brief synopsis?
So it is World War II and Hitler through the eyes of a 10-year-old boy who is being brought up in Germany.
I want to ask people when they choose things that aren't sort of traditionally happy and they're still bringing them to their chosen isolation situation. Why does it get to the bunker, and what emotions do you kind of associate with it?
This film kind of gives me a range of emotions, and that's what I like. It is hilariously funny, which kind of typically you wouldn't expect a film that is portraying this sort of thing to be funny. But then it's also got some really like heartbreaking, harrowing moments which really make you look at things and think, wow, shit, yeah, okay, that's how this would have felt. I just like that it kind of affects you in lots of different ways. It's not kind of like a one-trick pony. He's not just like Taika hasn't tried to make a film that's just sort of pushing the boat and trying to get laughs in a cheap way, but he's also not just going for something that any sort of war film normally goes for, which is like the intensity, like this is serious, this is awful. It kind of treads like a really fine line, and I think it does it really beautifully.
Speaking of, you mentioned some harrowing moments. Do you have a moment that you maybe want to talk about?
Oh, I want to kind of do it spoiler free because obviously anyone that hasn't watched it, it will ruin it. But there is a particular moment where a character realises something's happened and you don't see it coming. However, they have so subtly the whole way through the film sort of lined it up. So you kind of, it's like laying breadcrumbs for you.
Yeah.
Yet when it happens, it still absolutely blindsides you. You just don't see it coming. And I went to the cinema to watch it. It was one of the last things I watched in the cinema before we sort of had to stop. And I remember I did an actual like when it happened, because just before they showed it, the penny dropped, and I was just like, "Fuck! They did that." And I didn't even get like a second to kind of process it, because then it just kicked off straight again into like the story and where it was going. And it was only afterwards I walked out of the cinema and I was just like, "Wow, that bit hurt."
Before I even asked you that question, I knew the moment you were going to choose because, yeah, I mean, I just remember the reaction in this cinema when I saw it, and it was just absolute shock.
So you can understand what I mean with like the little breadcrumbs.
Oh, absolutely. On a second watch, I haven't had one, but I know for a fact that the breadcrumbs will pop even more.
I recently watched it again with a couple of friends who hadn't seen it, and I was really curious whilst we were watching it to see if they were picking up on these breadcrumbs at all, because now I knew what was going to happen. It felt obvious to me. I thought, oh, okay, yep, like I don't know how I didn't understand this was going to happen. And then they were absolutely horrified, and I was like, yeah, okay, it hits hard each time.
Yeah.
It wasn't just me sort of being in the moment. It really was so well done.
Yeah, I just think that's the difference when, between storytelling. That is why that film was got all the plaudits that it did. It was able to give us that kind of such a powerful gut punch. It felt like an indie film. It had some big people in it, obviously, but it was I really like Sam Rockwell in it.
I was just thinking of Sam Rockwell. He
Yeah.
is fantastic in it.
He's fantastic in everything. He's just an amazing guy. But yeah, it did so much with so little. Obviously, the time period's huge. It's one of the most, I would say, probably overdone time periods. But they took a kind of fresh angle on it, and the payoff for that moment was just so big. And that's why it did as well as it did. And so many films and TV shows could learn from that. Just simple
Yeah.
storytelling that's so effective and so powerful. Just such a kind of simple, wasn't even a gimmick. It was just like you say, breadcrumbs, just used so
Yeah.
simply, and then pow. And that's what you remember. We're talking about it, 6 months later. I'll probably
Yeah,
still be talking
exactly.
about it, in 5 years' time. I can't really remember any other films I've seen recently, with the exception of Avengers Endgame, because I end up talking about that and every time I do a podcast away. I don't remember having that kind of reaction in a cinema to see something
Yeah.
that wasn't like a superhero film for a long time. A long, long
Yeah.
time. Yep.
The only other thing that I've had a really strong reaction to recently was 1917, which is also like a war film, which is funny because they're sort of two films centered around the war that I've watched this year, and I've never actually watched war films before. They just have never been my thing. I've been very much of the mind of the world is doom and gloom, therefore I don't want to watch it anyway. But I could just watch the news if I wanted to see things like that. However, I ended up going to see it because I really liked the way that it was shot as like one continuous view. I was really interested sort of about the workings of this, and that sort of hit me really hard because they didn't try to sort of glamorize anything. They didn't also try and like ham it up and push home the whole like this is awful, this is a terrible thing, and it just felt very real. And it was the first time seeing something I just thought, wow, that's really horrendous, and I couldn't even imagine what that feels like.
I haven't seen 1917, unfortunately, but I watched Birdman with Michael Keaton, and I think the whole thing is predominantly one shot, but I think towards the end you can see the divide and it splits into a second shot. The idea of the continuous shot is something that is kind of cropping up more and more.
When it's done well, it is fantastic. It feels like immersive. It really kind of like pulls you in there. You're there with the character the entire way through.
We did a review recently. I think it's up on Patreon now, but it wasn't the whole film. But there, in the middle of this film, there was like a 10-minute one shot with this quite young actress on the screen, and she was so good in this one shot. And the camera, like every kind of half second, was just creeping in. It's a really interesting cinematic device and is being used to great effect right now. Yeah, no, I think that's interesting. I'll have to see 1917 and give you my opinion on it. Let's move on to number 8.
Okay, I'm going to go for my last game, and that's Fable 3.
Tell us a little bit about Fable.
So it's like a role-playing, action-y game. Each different game is set in the same place. It's the fictional place of Albion, but it's set at different time periods. So like the first one, you are an orphan boy, I believe. Then the next one takes place sort of over 500 years later. The next one is like 50 years after that second one. So there's different kind of like goals for each game, but it's all centered around like this same mythical place.
You've picked 3 games that are real like time drains. 2 in particular have like huge maps. I'm guessing that's by design. How big is Albion? Give us like a sense of maybe the amount of hours you've spent playing the game.
It's huge. I have racked up well over 150 hours, I would say, on Fable, sort of when I've been like hardcore into it. Like when it's brand new, I've got it fresh out of the wrapping because I like to have the actual discs rather than downloading it. And I will just play it for weeks and weeks and weeks for as long as I can. It's just a really nice way to focus on something that isn't you or isn't what's going on in the real world. I think it was probably one of the most different games I had played. I'd never really sort of dabbled with things that had like magic and bits like that. And again, it's one of those I ended up having my interest piqued when I saw my husband playing it. He's very into sort of mythical games like that. But all I liked the idea of is that you had a sidekick that was a dog. And this for me, I was just like, yeah, I want a puppy. So he ended up starting a new game for me, and I just kind of, I got sucked into it just purely because I wanted a puppy that I taught tricks to.
I like that. I think in one of the Fallout games you've got a dog and he's called Meat.
Oh,
So
amazing.
Yeah, so that's like, let's call it plan D, I guess.
Yeah.
If everything else goes wrong. What about Fable would you change?
So they bought a Fable out when the Connect was like a big thing and the new thing. I know obviously the idea was to get you like up and moving around and stuff, but just everything was really clunky. So when you had to sort of ride on your cart with your horse like across the map to an area because you hadn't sort of unlocked like the fast travel thing, you would literally just have to stand there or sit there like pretending you had the reins in your hands for ages and ages, but it wouldn't always go smooth and you'd like veer off to the side and it was just really clunky. um yeah, so that was a big letdown.
Okay, let's talk about your ninth and final choice.
So that will be show, I believe, and that should be Parks and Rec. It was a friend actually that got me into that, Terry. I had been going through some really horrible health issues with a thing that I've got called Crohn's disease, and I was pretty much just confined to the house, and I was just really low and not in a great place. And it was just like, this, you need to watch this. It's just something like you haven't seen before. And again, it's one of those kind of like mockumentary style shows, kind of like The Office is set in an office and you've got a camera crew following around. This is set in like a government building in the fictional town of Pawnee, Indiana. And yeah, this documentary team is following around some of the staff of this place, specifically at the Parks and Recreation Department.
Do you have a favourite moment, episode, or character?
Oh, I've been thinking this was the one that I found the hardest actually, if you were going to ask this question. And again, I think it's just more favorite moments because there's so many episodes that are just so good that I think, oh, this is my favorite. And then another one will pop in. I'm like, oh no, it's this one. So there's this character, this sort of a small character. Small is funny because it's a miniature horse called Lil Sebastian. And there's a funeral for him that is just, it gets me every time. It just really makes me laugh. And then you've got anything that involves Aubrey Plaza. It's got her as April Ludgate, and anything with her absolutely cracks me up, especially when it comes to any scene that she's in with Ron Swanson, who Nick Offerman beautifully portrays. Had the pure privilege to see him last year when he was doing a tour in London, and he was just fantastic. I don't want to say it was a comedic set because it wasn't really just comedy. It was more like just observations and little stories through his life, some songs that he had written about sort of the state of things in America at the time and all sorts. It was just kind of, I don't know, it was almost like a bit of a sneak peek into like the life of Nick Offerman.
He takes a lot of privilege in making things with his own hands, which I really like admire. I saw a TV show once where he went for an interview and he bought them like a little end table for just the studio, for like just enough, probably for like three mugs to sit on. I think he's
Amazing.
talked about making himself like a canoe,
Yeah.
just chopping down the tree, and he will smell wood and be able to like tell what it is. I just think that's just
Yeah.
so amazing.
So fun fact that I learned when I went to see him live is that he lost his virginity in a canoe that he made.
Wow,
I know.
holy shit, that's
At least I
impressive.
hope it's true because that's what he said during his show, and it was just one of the best things that I've heard.
Was it on the water at the time
Yeah,
or?
yeah, it was on the water.
Jesus,
Yeah.
that's pretty amazing. Yeah, Parks and Rec. Who do you think would appreciate this show?
I think anyone who is obviously a fan of the mockumentary style, anyone really that sort of likes The Office, if you're going to like The Office, you're going to like Parks and Rec and vice versa, I think. Also, someone that has patience because the first season is a little bit clunky. It kind of, you know where it's trying to hit, but it misses the mark sometimes. But there's some real good moments and solid acting that stand out in it. And you can see those little nuggets of gold. And if you progress a bit, it really sort of picks up in season two.
Well, Carla, thanks very much for giving us all of your choices. Two more things we've got to do. You got to tell us about your book because you get given a copy of Watchmen, and you get given a copy of 1001 Films to Watch Before You Die. So, what is your third book?
My third book is The Passage by Justin Cronin.
Maybe sell the passage to the people. Try and get them out there buying a copy.
I always find it so difficult to talk about it without going on some huge long diatribe. So I'm going to do my best. Stick with me. Um, it's one of those books. It spans in just the first book. It's part of a trilogy. In the first book, it spans over 100 years, and it sets the scene in the first part of the book, and you meet these characters, and then almost without warning it kind of jumps to like 100 years later, and then it introduces a whole new set of characters, and it's kind of like how it links those. This is obviously trying without spoilers, and how it links those people from past and present back to each other. So that's what I like. That's why it's quite interesting. That's what it's about in the vaguest sense without ruining it for people.
We did a Q&A recently, and we talked about our top 3 trilogies, and all of our choices were, I think, films, except one of Lex's, and he chose the Passage trilogy.
Brilliant choice.
So that's good. You're in good company. Did you watch the TV show?
I was going to, actually. I had it all recorded and ready to go, but was kind of dragging my feet on watching it because I'd seen the trailer and I was already super disappointed. And I was doing that whole, oh, do I just watch it and try and forget the books and take it for what it is? Or like, what do I do? And then it was actually the last time we had lunch, and we were discussing it, and you told me like Lex's views on it and stuff. And after you saying like what a big fan Lex is of it, that kind of sold it to me. I was just like, no, if they really felt that way about it, I know that I'm going to absolutely hate it, and I just couldn't bring myself to do it.
Yeah, I'm just trying to remember because it feels like a long time ago when we watched it. Obviously, the world has changed in many ways. I just remember it being quite dull, and I think, it was all set in one time period. I don't think that's giving anything away, the entire first season. So presumably the whole season is like 1 or 2 or 3 chapters or something, and so then
Yeah.
season 2 would have been like maybe 3 more chapters. Um, yeah, and I'll just keep it as broad as possible. I think there were decisions that they made regarding a great many of the people that Lex was kind of perplexed by. There was a very strange choice, even in like I think the final shot of the whole thing, and even I, as a non-fan, was like, why did why did they do that, Lex? And Lex was like, probably like shaking his head, like, oh god, like I just don't know.
Yeah.
It
Oh, I'm
was
really intrigued into what that is. You have to tell me after.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't particularly care, I would suggest that you maybe watch the final episode, because if you're not going to
Okay.
watch it, you might have an
Yeah.
interesting take on it actually. But I will
Okay.
tell you after we stop recording. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, just a shame, because from the enthusiasm I get from you, the enthusiasm I get from Lex, there is great source material here, but it's just been used poorly.
Definitely. I mean, to give you an idea of how much I love this book series and how much it means to me. So I own obviously the physical copies. I also own the Audible copies, and I can't sleep at night without listening to something. So I've got like this little wireless head pod that I pop in, and I will fall asleep listening to an audiobook every single night. And it will pretty much either be Harry Potter or it will be any one of the 3 books from this trilogy. I'll just chuck a timer on it and I'll fall asleep listening to it. And it's so nice because obviously wherever I then start the next day, I know the story so well that I can just pick straight off, and I find it weirdly comforting.
I also listen to things to sleep every night. Severe insomnia. I also listen to Harry Potter. Actually, I'm currently, I kind of rotate. I don't necessarily go the whole way through a thing. I'll just rotate CDs from different projects. But I'm currently on the Prisoner of Azkaban.
What's your favourite Harry Potter?
Oh, Prisoner of Azkaban,
Okay.
for sure. Yeah. Um, the Time Turner, I think, is a big part of it. I also think
Yeah.
Professor Lupin is a big part of it. But there are many great moments throughout all 7 books. But yeah, that's the one. And recently I bought myself, I think it arrived on Saturday. Uh, huge British sitcom fan. I got the complete Fawlty Towers audio CDs. They are joyous, and Andrew Sachs, who plays Manuel, has
Yeah.
recorded extra audio, because obviously not everything translates well into an
Yeah.
audio medium. So there's extra stuff that's only available on the audio. So that's been really great to listen to. So yeah, you're preaching to the choir about audiobooks at night time. Right, final question. What is your luxury item?
My roller skates.
I have seen you roller skating. You are pretty goddamn good. Do you do any like roller derby, or do you do anything like that, or do you just enjoy just skating?
I did almost 15 years of competitive figure skating.
Oh, I know, but I'm being the audience, you know. Yeah, like tell us a bit about that.
Oh, so from a pretty young age to I think I must have been about 16 when I ended up having to stop. Yeah, I roller skated in competition. I've skated for Great Britain. I did it for a long, long old time. It was a big part of my life. It was one of those things. I have always been the clumsiest person. If there is nothing, absolutely nothing to fall over, I will fall over. Yet put me on a pair of skates and I am a goddamn swan. I'm so graceful. I don't know where it comes from. So I think that was probably the way that my nan, who was the one that got me into skating, tried to stop me from injuring myself. I could have sort of gone further to like the world competitions and things like that, but unfortunately the real world came a knocking once I left school and I had to get a job. And then that didn't coincide with training times and things. And unfortunately, you can't make much money from competitive roller skating like you can with ice skating.
I think it's a really interesting choice, and I think it was funny yesterday. You were asking me whether, like, you're on a desert island. Is there any way you could actually skate?
It
If you
didn't even
change
occur to me that I could have all these electronic devices on my desert island. Yeah, I couldn't use my skates.
I will create a kind of basketball court on your desert island. You
It's
know,
very kind of you.
but I mean, that's the kind of guy I am. I'm going to give you like a basketball court size, so you can, go around in little loops. Bit of an eyesore, but it's your island.
One person's eyesore is like another person's insert something beautiful here.
What colour do you want the concrete?
Pink.
Boom, done.
Thank you very much.
Carla, thank you very much for being a great patron, being a great guest. Thank you for taking time out your busy schedule to talk to me today. Yeah, you've had some really great choices, and thanks.
Awesome. Thank you.
And thanks everybody for listening. I will be back in about a month's time with the next episode, and I think I'm going to be talking to somebody from the Take a Knee for Marvel versus DC podcast, which will be really interesting. I'm wondering how many of their choices will be Marvel or DC things. You won't hear me complaining, but yeah, it could be all nine. It could be games, TV shows, and films. So you just never know. And then 2 months from now, I'll be talking to somebody from Cage's Kiss, who do a Nick Cage specific podcast. And again, I ask myself how many Nick Cage films are going to be brought to their isolation situation. Yeah, go crazy. Thanks for
Amazing.
listening.